Your journey has been an interesting one up to here. You've questioned so much more than those around you. You've even questioned yourself as to how you could have grown into these thoughts. Am I crazy? When did I begin to think differently? Why do people in general appear so limited in their thought process? Rest assured, you are not alone. The world is slowly waking up to what you already know inside, yet can't quite verbalize. Welcome to the Spiritual Dope Podcast, the show that answers the questions you never even knew to ask, but needed the answers to. Questions about you, this world, the people in it. Most importantly, how do I proceed now moving forward? We don't claim to have all the answers, but we sure do love living in the question. Time for another hit of Spiritual Dope with your host, Brandon Henley. Let's get right into today's episode.
All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there, Spiritual Dope. On today's episode, we have Nicole Kerr, an award-winning health expert and co-author of Eating the Rainbow, Lifelong Nutritional Wellness. With appearances on CNN, PBS, and other major networks, Nicole brings a unique perspective on wellness, lifestyle, and nutrition. Her 30 years of experience span government, nonprofit, military and academia, healthcare, corporate, and private consultation. Following a near-death experience, Nicole's healing journey led her to focus on emotional energy and spiritual well-being. Join us today as we delve into her transformative insights on holistic health and well-being. Nicole, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Brandon. I'm delighted and excited and appreciative for you to have me on your show. For
sure. Delighted and excited. What a way to be. So, Nicole, I start these off with, I keep reminding myself, we're going to start off with the bang that I usually put in the back of this, right? So give me a second here. Nicole, okay. I typically think of this podcast as something like a spiritual speed dating show, right? Like people are like just kind of flipping through the Rolodex of like, I'm looking for my next spiritual date, right? So we're going to ask ChatGPT to give me some speed dating questions for Nicole. And we're going to see what we come up with. Dear Spiritual Bachelorette number 1, could you tell us more about your experience working with various... No, that was no good. Let's do... Here we go. What advice do you have for individuals looking to achieve a balanced and a holistic approach to their health?
Well, there's 4 domains of health that you really are going to have to address. And most of us stay in that first one, which is the physical. You got to take responsibility and eat healthy. Okay. We missed the mark big time with COVID as government agencies to get the opportunity out to tell people it's their responsibility to eat healthy, just wait for vaccines, comfort food. We didn't think that was going to last for 3 years of comfort food, right? So it's about eating healthy. I'm a registered dietitian. I've been telling people that for years, and the needle has not moved on fruit and vegetable consumption. So why? It's because all this other stuff has so much fat, salt, and sugar in it that it's addictive. Secondly, it's the mental component that you got to address. Okay. That's the stressor. 99% of people that get admitted to ERs, there's a stress component. We have got to deal with stress, not from a reactive point of view, but proactive. So figure out what are your stressors ahead of time. If you go to work and you have a boss that stresses you out, you got to figure out ways to deal with that boss before you go in, not go in and blow up. Okay, so there's that whole piece to it. And I love the Ted Lasso because he has got some great tips for how to not stress, right? Okay, so watch that show and you will learn about how he handles stress. Third is the emotional. Unfortunately, Americans are very illiterate when it comes to the emotional quadrant. We pretty much get raised with 4 emotions: bad, sad, mad, and glad. But there is a buffet of emotions that we need to learn. And not only do we need to learn them, but we need to learn how to express them. And most of us cut them off right here at the chin. We think them. So I think I'm mad at you, Brandon. I can say I'm angry, right? But I don't allow that anger to actually get down into the rest of my body. And that's the problem, because it actually, if you don't let it get in your body and express it, it's going to stay there and it's going to cause problems. It's going to show up physically for you, mark my word, later in life if you don't deal with it. Because what's happening is you're hitting a current stressor in your life and it's mimicking something that happened way back in your lifetime, and you didn't know how to handle it then, so you just shoved it down. So your amygdala, that part of your brain that's fight, flight, and fear, that takes over, and you are not going to make a rational decision that's clear if your amygdala is making it out of fear. You want that part of your brain up here, that prefrontal cortex, to be making it. That's that executive decision making. And I'm sorry, but that amygdala is going to hijack it every single time you get in a situation and that fear starts. And that's the worst place to make a decision, is when you're in fear. It's going to be not a good decision for you. So you've got to learn to start feeling your emotions. Embodying is the word that is big now. Embodying your emotions. And every single one of us has emotions that we have not felt. And so I just can't say enough about how important that has been. Neuro-emotional technique, NET, is a great tool. It's non-invasive. There's a great documentary on YouTube called Stressed. It's about an hour long. I encourage all your viewers to watch it, because it shows what's going on in the brain when you don't do this, and how you can resolve this using acupressure points, your 2 emotional points here, and the breath. Okay. It uses different sciences, kinesiology, acupressure, and psychology, and it combines it, and it works. And it's got peer-reviewed, scientific-based evidence that supports it. And that's what you want to look for in a lot of these techniques, because some of the stuff that's out there is just, let's just say, it's a little bit shady, okay? So we need to work on that emotional piece, every single one of us, and teach our kids how to express their emotions and not bottle them up. Because I grew up in the South, and it was like, you don't get angry, you don't hurt your mother. I think that's the worst sin you could do, is to hurt your mother. But that is not good for us. We need to be able and be allowed to let those emotions flow. And then the 4th dimension is spiritual. And that's the one that I'm really on the bandwagon with now, with my new book, You Are Deathless. And when I was 19, I was a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy. I was one of the first women out there. You want to talk about abuse? Mental, physical, spiritual, sexual abuse. I mean, those academies are just filled with it, especially your freshman year. And so I went out there because I am a recovering people pleaser, and I am trying to please my dad. He was a graduate, so he was like, okay, one of you kids, I want you to follow in my footsteps and go to my alma mater. How many kids have heard that, right? And so I did all the tests and everything, and to my surprise, my principal calls me in his office and says, Nicole, your representative's on the phone. He has something to tell you. And he's like, Nicole, you're going to the United States Air Force Academy. And I was like, wow. Oh, shit, I got to go now. Right. And I had no interest in military prior to that. None whatsoever.
For sure, no doubt. Let me pause you there for one moment, right? Like, so I love where you're at, right? Like, let's just kind of pause there, because I know we've got the story kind of to tee up here. First of all, I guess we could almost end the podcast there, right? Like, if somebody tuned in and heard that, then they got a nice amount. And I think that a lot of the things, it's funny, like I always tell people, and I work with a lot of men, right? I always say, hey, men know like 3 different emotions. They know like love, anger, and sex. Right. And like that, middle one's like, so everything in between, they don't know how to process. Right. And so it becomes anger or love. And that's it. And everything else in between it leads to like frustration, because if you don't know what you're feeling, how are you able to express it? Like you're saying, I hadn't even thought about really like expressing it. I was just trying to figure out how to find it. Right. to your point.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge tip, right? Like, love to hear more about how, people, or even just a direction, right? If this isn't your, primary space, is like, where can people go to find more, or, what can we share on how to express your emotions in a healthy manner?
Well, identifying is the first one. And if you haven't identified emotions before, it really is confusing, and you're not sure you're at the right emotion. And so it could be that you're frustrated and you're angry and you're resentful and you're also emotionally repressed and depressed. That's all in the same bucket of the liver gallbladder energy meridian, which is anger. It's just depression is the flip side of it. So it's easier sometimes to go into the depression instead of actually bringing up the anger and dealing with it. So there's a lot of different techniques out there, the emotional code, but they all are based on acupressure points that you can hold and breathing through the emotion. And that's the key to life is breath, right? Without our breath, and Hawaii, where I lived for 20 years, hale is what white people were called. That means without breath.
Hale?
Hale, yes. And
yeah, look, it makes sense.
Yeah, because the missionaries came over with all their diseases and all their, this is what we're going to, you need to do. And it killed most of them. And so they look at us, and that is the term the Native Hawaiians have given white people that come there is hale, and you're without breath. And if you think about, when someone is dead, if they're in, say they didn't get cremated, they're a corpse in the coffin, as another way to look at that. I don't care how great that cosmetologist is that worked on that person it's something off. It doesn't look like the person you knew. And that's because we all have an energy body, and that energy body splits when we die, and our soul is released. That soul, that is your breath. That is when you go out in the winter and that's you. That's you in energy form. And so that's the piece that's missing. And so breathing, that's why they talk about the breath, is breathing through it. When you have a panic attack, when you have an anxiety attack, hyperventilate, the breath is key to regulating that again, because otherwise you just go hyper vigilant and you just freak out, and then they need to give you something like, Ativan or Valium or something like that to get your nervous system calm back down.
Right, to keep your dorsal vagus, I guess, kind of on lockdown.
The vagus nerve, yeah.
So breath work is something that I work with as well. And to your point, it's where is it showing up in my body? Like if I feel the anxiety, I feel it coming on, breathe, right? Take a breath. And it's just that split second that takes you from, you were talking about I always just say lizard brain because I'm not technically inclined. It goes from like your lizard brain to your prefrontal cortex. Like, okay, hold on a second. The body's been driving me all this time. Now this is a moment where I can take a hold of the steering wheel and be like, it's not, you're from Hawaii right now or from coming back out from there. It's not a shark. We should be good, right? Like we're all right. It may be my boss and, maybe not ideal, but okay, we can just hold it for a second and realize, don't freak out in this moment. So I love that, what you're talking about there. And I would also say,
Brandon, for a lot of people, you need to, I suffer with migraines. And what I had noticed is the pattern was the migraine would come on the day after I got a stressor or a trigger. So sometimes you have to back yourself up and go, okay, what just happened maybe an hour ago or 2 hours ago? And your body's taken a little bit of time to catch up with what the reaction was. I just got in a fight with my ex-wife and she called me this and she's been calling me this and she won't quit even though I've asked her not to. She won't listen to me. I get so angry when she won't listen to me. That's what triggered it. Is anybody in my life going to ever listen to me? And I guarantee you it's going to go back to some point earlier in your childhood when somebody didn't listen to you and you thought you were worthless. You weren't valuable. You were not important enough to be listened to.
For sure. No, look, and I think it's like you said, it's like stored energy. Where these, I don't know if you've seen, they're doing quantum computing and specialized water, right?
Cool. No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah. So I mean, they're literally like using drops of water for quantum computing, specialized water. And if there's no we're what 85% water. I don't know what the number is, but we're pretty specialized water. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of stored energy and the information here, right, in these areas. So it gets trapped in the body unless there's some type of release. Is kind of what I've heard, and I'm hearing you kind of back that up, right? Just. And
from a Chinese perspective, water is fear. It's all about impending doom. It's dread. It's fear. It's panic. It's paralyzed will. So that is the motion that goes with that. And you will notice if you start peeing more frequently, you're in a state of fear. Okay. Especially if your water intake.
Doesn't mean I'm getting older.
No, sorry. And I will tell you, that's all regulated by your hippocampus. I mean, your hypothalamus is what I wanted to say. So, there's always that connection, because I couldn't understand why I would get scared and I would be running to the toilet all the time. And that's my body trying to process that. Now, here's a good tip as a dietitian. First thing you do when you get up in the morning is what?
Pee.
Yeah. And then what do you do?
I don't know. I don't have a set thing, but
do you go get a cup of coffee?
I put my pants back on, Nicole.
Do you get a cup of coffee?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to tell you is, before you drink your coffee, hydrate, because you just released water and you're starting off the day deficient in terms of your hydration if you just go straight to coffee. So drink at least a big glass of water before you get the coffee down, because the coffee's a diuretic. That's just a little.
Yeah. No, that's a good tip. I love it.
And you need to stay hydrated, because if you don't stay hydrated, that doesn't help your body from a nervous system point of view either.
Good stuff. The other thing you had in here too, where'd it go? In terms of, you said the emotional quadrant, in terms of things that you like to share with people that will help them to identify, get closer to their emotions, express, etc. Is that something that you use, the emotional quadrant?
I do neuro-emotional technique. I actually went and got certified in it because it helped me so much, because especially people in the military, you're taught things are black or white. And a lot of guys are. There's no gray area. So you don't learn to live in that uncertainty gray area. You don't feel, it does not settle right with your system. So it's about learning to live in that gray area and the uncertainty. And that is very difficult and produces a lot of anxiety for people, especially with those with PTSD and other issues. So things aren't black and white. There is a lot of gray in life, and being able to flow with that gray is important.
Okay, so that's part of your technique.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm asking, right? Because when you said emotional quadrant, I thought there might be a specific tool. One thing that I share out a lot is the Pluchik wheel. Right, okay. That's just got again, I'm not so great with them. I was 40 years old, and somebody says "Hey, Brandon, I'm not hearing a whole bunch of emotional language coming from you." I'm like, well, I'm not really good with emotions, and I went and I studied the emotions, and I think I did daily check-ins, and I would just take something. I was clicking on words. I thought I knew what they meant in the Pluchik wheel, and I didn't. I was wrong. Yeah. Right, an emotion that I thought that I knew wasn't the emotion that was there, right? I was wrong. It's hard for us to say that.
No, and really being able, like I said, to expand that vocabulary of emotions, resentment is the one a lot of people hold on to, is you're having to, and we'll say it with, I can't stomach this, or I get butterflies. We'll use phrases like that are indicative of emotions going on. And we're not able to process what it is. But gall and resentment, you're having to, gall is that bitterness of having to endure something that you don't want to do. And resentment is, same thing, having to sit there and take it when you don't want to or can't, or you're powerless, Right. So that is definitely an area that everybody needs to keep working on. And because all of us at some point in our life, we're taught to push our stuff down, certain emotions. And depending on your childhood and your family of origin. And when we feel, we heal. Have you heard that?
No.
Yeah. I'll say it again. When we feel, we heal. And the word heal, if you think about it, has a common origin with the word whole, WHOLE, and holy, HOLY, pointing to relationship between your body and your spirit.
I like it. We let me make sure that we got everything from that front And there we did. So yeah, thanks for great introduction there. Into kind of what Nicole's about, some of the space that she's in. The other space that I think that we want to talk about today is not being afraid of looming death, right? The not being afraid of the end game. Nicole, and this is kind of where I paused you. I think you were starting to lean into your story. You joined the military, and it wasn't really
it wasn't
what you were planning. Wasn't your first plan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, pick us up from there.
Okay. So, like I said, I'm a recovering people pleaser, and a lot of people have that identity, which, if you really think about it, is based in fear. You're pleasing someone because you're afraid they're not going to love you or they're not going to respond in a positive way. And as a little kid, you may have needed that in order to survive. But as an adult, it does not serve you to keep trying to please people, especially narcissists, because they can't be pleased. So you need to give up that identity. And that's not easy if you built your image around that. But we all have mistaken identities that we keep, and we need to start shedding them and letting them go in order to get to our true essence. So here I go into the Air Force Academy. Okay, no interest in the military or flying or anything like that. I'm going there because my dad wants me to go there. I get into boot camp. Okay, I'm like Private Benjamin. I am like blowing the base off of the targets, with the machine guns. I'm just like, they're yelling at me. They're telling me to get down and do, 100 push-ups. And it's like, that's just insane. I can't do that. And so it was constant hazing and harassment. And during, boot camp was 6 weeks. 3 weeks into boot camp, we had our first telephone call. It was 3 minutes long. I heard my mother's voice at the end, and she said, hello. And I just said, Mom. And then I proceeded to cry for 3 minutes to the point of hypervigilance. Of just hyperventilating. And then my commander said, click, that's it. Kerr, go over there and get yourself together. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So what did I do? I went over there and got myself together. It took me years to realize, Brandon, that was my first panic attack, because I needed permission from my mother to say, honey, if this isn't working out for you, if this isn't what you want to do, you have permission to come home. You can quit. It's an option. You're not a failure if you decide this isn't the path you want to take. But in my brain and the way I was programmed and raised by my dad, it would have been seen as failure, and it would have been shame. And I couldn't bear the shame. I just couldn't bear quitting. So I stuck it out, continued to stay there. And then the beginning of my sophomore year, my soul said, we're out of here. This is just horrible. You live in fear and terror every single day that something bad is going to happen to you. And that's the way my system started programming itself. So the beginning of the sophomore year, we had a big squadron function, and I was one of the last people to leave. I got a ride home with a senior cadet, and we never made it back. He wanted to stop at a bar. Now, granted, I grew up, I was not allowed alcohol. I was not allowed to date. Those were my dad's rules. No drinking, no smoking, and no dating upperclassmen. So here I was, for the first time in my life, I was going to have some fun. We actually stopped at a bar, and I had 2 beers. I had 1 cigarette. I did not even know this guy, but I thought, we'll make him kiss or whatever. Needless to say, he was drunk, and I didn't know it. And my memory came back 19 years later. He made a sexual pass at me, and I said no, and he got very angry with me, and he turned the wheel of the Corvette, and it fishtailed out, hit a huge boulder, flipped over. We were both thrown out, and I was pronounced dead at the scene, and he was alive. And I know this part because the paramedic came to my room about 10 weeks later, and he told me what happened. And so I pieced the story for my book together through medical records, I went back to Colorado Springs 25 years later and met my surgeon and the EMT and the nurse. and they had never seen me out of the bed. I was in the bed for 4 months because I had so many injuries. And the first thing they all said to me was, "Oh my gosh, you're so tall," because I'm 5'11", and they're like, when you're in a bed for that whole time, they don't know it. It's just you're sitting
right.
So it was so great to reconnect with them. But I will tell you that the memory part came back. I went on with life once I got physically well. I will tell you, my mother and my dad are religious addicts. I grew up Southern Baptist and Lutheran, Missouri Synod. So we did a lot of church growing up. And the concept of God I was raised with was God was loving and caring and protective and wanted the best for you. But there were some rules, and if you broke those rules, you were going to be punished, and the wrath of God would come on you, and you would go to hell, and you would be separated eternally from your father, your earthly father and your heavenly father. So very heavily indoctrinated the Bible Belt with those concepts. And when my accident happened, that was the concept of God that I had. So I feared God tremendously. And so I died in that state of fear. And that's one of the reasons I know I was brought back to tell people that you do not need to fear death. What I experienced on the other side, when my memory did come back, I was working at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was going to Starbucks, got my caffeine fix, and all of a sudden, Brandon, I could clearly remember how I was sitting in the Corvette. And before then, I only remembered bright white lights. That's all. And the doctor said it was not the operating room lights because I was unconscious. And so she said it must be some kind of, mystical, spiritual, near-death something or other, Nicole, because I have no answer for you. But that was all I remembered. So 20 years I went on with my life, got back into school to see if I could use my brain again, went into dietetics because I developed an eating disorder, because my parents told the doctor when he said, Nicole has been through massive trauma, she needs to see a psychiatrist or psychologist. And my mother looked straight at the doctor and said, Jesus and God are our psychiatrist and we'll be just fine. Well, she was wrong.
Wow.
And I was not fine. And the body, I was far from fine, okay?
Sure.
So the body will adapt, usually in an unhealthy way, and that's what happened to me. Is it adapted by compulsive eating, binge eating, and back in the 80s it was known as compulsive eating. Today it's binge eating disorder, which at its root is so shame-based. It's it affects a lot of women in particular, men also, but it's the root of it is you hate yourself. You're in so much pain emotionally. And I was in pain because my dad told me I deserved what I got and blamed me. And I didn't have the identity or the power. I lost my power in that moment when he blamed me, and I took that on and believed it. And that is probably, Brandon, the saddest thing that I've done to myself is that I believed him. And even though I wasn't driving or any of that, I couldn't say back to him, screw you, Dad, and your 3 rules. I wasn't driving. I didn't have anything to do with it. I'm not to blame. I could never say that to him. And to this day, he still blames me. He's never forgiven me for this.
Wow.
And I realized that this Memorial Day, I'm a 100% disabled veteran. I dishonored, here's another emotion. I dishonored myself by taking on that blame and shame that someone else said I deserved, and embodied that instead of me being able to say, no, I'm not going to take that on. That's not mine. And I think I really realized that's when I lost my power. I severed my relationship with myself, became that people pleaser, because that's what I thought I could do to get their forgiveness or get their grace back. And I tried that and tried it and tried it, and it never worked. And I just kept getting sicker and sicker with different migraines, all these other things, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's a piece.
Trying to prove your worth, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just trying to, right? Just, I am worthy, and you know, trying to
The love piece. Yeah.
disavow that story, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you know, when you're a parent, or when you're a child, even 19, hell, I think even into your 30s, man, it's like you took your father, you know, he's the authority, right?
Yes.
What he said was true. Even if you knew that it wasn't true, you're so programmed to take it, it's there.
Yeah.
And it took, I don't know how long for you. It sounds like, you know, just,
it's my whole adulthood.
yeah.
You know? 40 years.
To finally say, you know what, that's wrong.
Yeah.
You're wrong, right? And it's hard. It's not, and so I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry for you, right? That's a tough one.
Well, and you know, the clicker of this is this a year ago May. My roommate quit the academy that Christmas. She went home and never came back, and so I didn't talk to her for 39 years. I found her on Facebook, and the other two roommates, we got together, and the first thing she said, none of us had seen her in almost, 4 decades. She said, "Nicole, I'm so sorry I caused the crash." And I said, "What?" And she said, "You and I had a plan that we were going to go back to the academy together." And I switched the plan because there was a guy that I really liked. He was drunk and he wanted me to drive his car back because you couldn't have a car out there till you were a junior or senior. And I wanted to fool around with him, and I didn't want you with us. So I told you there's one guy left. He's in a Corvette convertible. And you told me, well, he's been drinking. And I told you they've all been drinking. Go have some fun. I'll see you back at the academy.
Nah.
And she said, you never showed up. And so she said, I've been haunted, and I blamed myself. So she's blaming herself. I'm blaming myself. The idiot driver, and it turns out he was an alcoholic. And, it just was like unbelievable. And she said, look at, if I would have just said, hey, get in the car, of course I'll drive you back, our lives would have been totally different. But it just goes to show and I put this in the book in the epilogue because it came in right at the end of the publication date. And I put it in there because communication is important. I didn't have that memory, and she thought I did. And I was angry at her and never wanted to talk to her again. And so now we're getting our relationship back together. But once again, she severed her relationship with herself and what she really wanted to do because of this, and blaming herself. And then I'm over here doing it to myself. And it's just sad at the end of the day, but we're moving through it. We've worked through it, and we've grown and we've evolved, and we are who we are today. And I can now speak to this with conviction and validation. And I've been to the other side. There's nothing to fear. I didn't want to come back. I tried 2 more times to leave in the hospital during an operation. I actually had a code blue where my heart stopped, and they couldn't get me back. And so they went and actually told my parents, that I was dead, and just start making funeral arrangements. And then the surgical nurse comes back in and said, her heart just started again. And
was that during the 4 months that you were there?
Yeah, that was 2 weeks after the crash. I went in for emergency surgery. And then the third near-death experience I had was my lungs kept filling up with fluid. And so they would drain them, those big old needles you see in the movies. Well, that's to drain your lungs. And they drain it. And I didn't know what was going on because my hands were fastened down. I thought the respiratory therapist was taking my oxygen away. And it wasn't, and I was suffocating, and they did it again, and the same thing happened. And then at that point, my spirit left my body again, and they had one thing that they were going to try, which was a simple thing, a diuretic, okay? And that was the last thing. If the diuretic didn't work, I was going to suffocate to death. And today, that is, when I look back at my fears, it was always not getting enough air. And one of those surgeries, I woke up with a ventilator, and that is really hard to have a machine breathing for you, and then to have suffocated like that is just a horrible memory to have in terms of death, and so, but what I know is at the moment of death, there is no pain. Leading up to it, you may be in pain and you may need morphine and stuff like that. But that moment that your spirit, your soul leaves you, that's when there's no pain. You're never alone. I really want people to hear this. You are not alone. There is a whole dimension on the other side filled with angels, deceased loved ones that come in and support you to cross over to the other side. And the angels on the other side want to help us, but we have to ask for help. And that's something a lot of us are not good at, but we need to develop a relationship with our angels and ask for help, and not just in a crisis, because they are there and they want to help. But because of something called free will, most of us choose not to do that.
When you say other side, is it just, and it sounds like, would it be right? Or, could I say like they're just in a dimension that we're not capable of experiencing right now? Like they're here with us now?
Yes. But
just not, like it was a Harvey, right? The invisible Harvey guy.
Yes, yeah.
So
yes.
Is it more like that? Like they're here, they're present,
yes.
They're like, can't help unless you ask, right? Type of thing.
Well, is it? They will come in case of an emergency. Like in my situation, it was, I learned in the book, I called it Casper the Ghost, because I knew he was a male. I knew that angel came down and picked me up when I flew out the windshield and took me up to a different space and a different dimension. And up there, it was like I could hear and understand everything, but I'm in soul form. I could see my body in the ditch, so I'm not in a human form. And they're not speaking English, so I don't know how, whether through telepathy or whatever, but I just intuitively heard this conversation of the angels. We want to help you, make sure people would know that they ask for help. And I promise you, if you get in the habit of asking for help, you're not going to be disappointed. The evidence will show up. Maybe not in the way you think it's going to show up, but you will get help. It is not going to go unheeded. And I think, that white light that I was in, that is Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience, says that is the most common symptom that people that experience near-death have. And it's not like a deer in the headlight light. It is like this cocooning light of love and just comfort and beauty and loving kindness and unconditional love, and just, you're blissed out beyond blissed out. I don't even have words for it. I really don't.
Sure.
But I just know that on that other side of death, that quote, God, whatever you want to call your concept of God, was all around me. In fact, there's nowhere that God is not, because God, in my evolving concept, is this life source energy. It's not a fixed person, in heaven that's documenting things. God was,
that's Santa Claus.
Yeah. God was me. I was God. God was presence and fullness and oneness. But most of all, God was love, this pure, non-judgmental love. And unfortunately, in our culture, love has so many conditions that humans put on it that really.
Well, conditional love, right? There's and
that was my dad.
There's unconditional love, and then there's like this other thing, right? It's kind of like it's like sugar and sugar substitutes.
Yes, and that more and more evidence is coming up. Those I call them the baby trio. They package them in the little blue and yellow and pink baby colors. that stuff is chemicals,
Yes,
and
that's
it's
terrible.
not
Yeah,
bad
yeah.
for your nervous system. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like in that state, Brandon, it's like it wasn't that I'd suddenly been forgiven for my mistakes. It's just that they no longer existed. Nothing I had done on earth was.
Well, they weren't mistakes, right? Like
Yeah,
they weren't weighed and measured. It was just like, well, it was welcome, Nicole. It was welcome, Nicole.
That's right. It's like that's how your story played out on earth. You're up here. You're not being judged, okay? And that is another huge concept I want people to understand from the positivity of death is you're not judged over there. There is nothing anybody or anything is judging you for. You do have a life review of your life in order so that I think the things that you did on this earth, how did it impact yourself and others in the world? Because we need to be more conscious and aware how everything and everybody is connected. And right now there's a big disconnect with a lot of people. And that is causing a lot of fear, which is causing a lot of low vibration, loss of clarity. And we need to understand that we're all one in this bigger space. And that, like in the military, we always said, all of us bleed red. It doesn't matter what color you are or any of that. And we need to get beyond all of that kind of stuff and evolve to this place of this consciousness where everyone and everything is connected because we're all energy. That vapor that escapes your soul, that's energy, and love is energy as well. And that's a different way to think about love, but it is an energy as well as an emotion.
And that's what you experienced.
Absolutely.
In your NDEs.
Yeah. And, I think in our society, if you think about almost every book that's written, death itself is cloaked in this veil of doom and gloom. And it has this cloud of depression and negativity around it and throughout our culture and society. And what I'm trying to do is to help change that worldview or at least in America, and the vibration and the cultural misunderstanding surrounding death. And to do this, we got to start addressing the difficulty getting there, which is our fears. No one wants to talk about death, but the deal is no one's guaranteed tomorrow or even tonight. I certainly didn't think I was going to die at 19 years old. I'm sure the people that were murdered in that outlet mall did think that they were going to not be able to go home and crawl in their beds, So, we have to prepare ourselves, and it's something we avoid like the plague. It really is. And we've got to do it on a spiritual level, and we've got to do it on a physical level, because I have seen so many families that have been fractured, that have been torn apart because of the parent or whoever died did not specify what needed to be done, and people wound up in fights, in lawsuits, and just totally the relationship within the families just collapsed because of greed and other things,
When you say prepare for death, are you talking about on a singular personal self level, make sure your shit's in order so that your family's not a mess?
Right. I believe your beliefs about God shape your relationship with death. So I'm asking you, what is your concept of God? And in the book, I worked with a little 6-year-old girl. And to this date, this is the best concept of God that I've been able to use. And she was very upset because she was adopted and she was at a fundamentalist church and she did something, quote, bad, and she thought she was going to hell and she was going to be separated again from this family that adopted her. So she was wetting her bed at night. She was having all kinds of issues, out of fear. So I said to her, well, how do you see God? And I'm just going to read out of here. She eagerly told me, God is a blue spirit with colors and balloons in all different colors, no head, and can talk. So clearly this little girl is still having a direct experience with God, no filters from other people. And I love that. I just love that, and to me, the children are the closest to that, but to the other side, because they don't have all those filters and belief systems. And what we're looking at are belief systems that got imprinted into us that are no longer serving us. And they're winding up sabotaging us because we want to be healthier. We want to lose weight. And then boom, we get stuck in that belief. And the next thing we know, we're like, oh, forget about it. Give me the pint of Ben & Jerry's and the Domino's pizza.
I know how to fix this.
That's a condensed, but I love that little version of God. And and that's what I say to people, come up with your own concept of what you think God is, because that is the relationship you have to develop. And that is something only you can do. And I will tell you, if it's fear-based, it's not of God or
Amen.
source or whatever you want to call it.
Nothing. I find that not a whole lot of good comes from a place of fear, right?
No.
You mentioned kind of like doing continuous prayer, praying, and have kind of a proactive approach. What does that look like for you? Like if I'm praying, am I thankful for the things as though I've already got them? What does prayer look like in a proactive kind of sense?
Okay. Well, first of all, I was raised where prayer was a certain position you had to get. You had to get on your knees next to the bed, hands folded, prayer position, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Let that go. You don't have to be in any particular position for a prayer to, quote, work. Prayer is energy, okay? And that's why collectively prayers work. It's a collective energy of people's thoughts going in the same direction. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, You're with me? So in my prayers, I've decided I don't know what's best for you, Brandon. So I'm going to pray for your highest and greatest good, okay? And whatever that looks like for you and your Ohana, your family, that's what I want. Because I've seen so many people say, oh, I'm just praying that the cancer is going to go in remission, or I'm praying that, and like my brother-in-law died of ALS, which is horrible. And my sister kept praying to Jesus that, okay, a miracle is going to happen. It's just going to go into remission. And it didn't. He passed away from it. And her boys are still struggling. I mean, they're in their 20s now, that they're struggling with God, because it's like you pray to this God for this and you got no evidence. And I call it the vending machine concept of God. You put in a certain behavior and you think if you do all the right things, then you should get, if you punch Coke, you should get Coke out. But that's not how it works. And when you
can't use Nicole, you can't use a Canadian coin in that one.
No, you can't. It don't work. So, it's kind of going, instead of throwing everything out the door, I've had to go back, what pieces work for me? And prayer works. And what I do now is I talk to my angels, because every single one of us has at least one guardian angel, at least one. And you can ask your angel, please tell me your name, or please give me some evidence that you're here, or whatever it is. You can do it at night before you go to sleep, and like you're just having a conversation. But start a dialogue. Another good thing that I got from Lee Harris is if you journal, which is great to help you get out emotions and feelings and things and help to reflect. What is it that my soul wants to tell me today? Because I'll tell you, growing up in the South, I did not know what a soul was. I knew what soul food was, and I knew what soul music was, and I knew if I was bad, my soul was going to hell. But I did not have a concept of what a soul really is or was. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that can articulate that today. It's like, well, what is my soul? So ask, what is it my soul wants me to know today? And then just sit with that. And see, you may not get anything, but, you could try. You can do the left-handed, right-handed thing, your non-dominant, dominant hand. You ask the question with your dominant hand, and then the non-dominant hand responds. And that's usually your child, because you have to slow it down and it looks like a child's writing. That's coming from that child part of you that's answering the question. And you will probably be amazed at what that child part of you is still dealing with or
sounds
remembering.
like a powerful exercise. Yeah, sounds like a powerful one. Nicole, one of the other things you wanted to touch on was soul fracture.
Yeah. Okay. this is something I really wish I would have known about when my crash happened, because when it did, among other things, parts of my soul left me, and that's known as soul loss. And there's symptoms of this. And so I'm going to just tell you the 3 symptoms that I think you may identify with or not. I didn't want to be here. Okay. I knew when I was on the other side, when they told me I was going to come back, I was like, no, I do not want to get back in that body. I'm going to be pain and suffering. I've got to deal with an amputation. I mean, there were so many issues that I had to deal with physically. I was like, I don't want to get back in that body and be here. So I knew that I didn't want to be here. And I even tried a couple more times to leave. And my angel James was like, nope, you have a purpose here. You have a mission here. You need to come back. So he had to work really hard to keep me alive. Second, a low level, consistent feeling that something is missing. And it's interesting to note with this is where a lot of compulsive behaviors or addictions can fall into. And for me, I can clearly see the link between my compulsive eating and my feeling of emptiness, because I didn't believe in that God that I was raised with anymore. My family blamed me and didn't. My whole dynamic with my parents had changed now. So why I was never going to be able to get their forgiveness, why live, so to speak. And then I've got this body that I was in such awesome shape, which probably helped me live. Now I can't even walk, it's like, why live? So that depression kind of feeling. And then the third one is I cannot get over this. It's like, I manifested this chronic wasting. I was like, I never could gain weight. And it's only been in the last year that I've actually gained the weight and kept it on. And it's because I've addressed these soul parts. But I just felt stuck with this chronic health condition and having to be hyper vigilant about my safety, keeping myself safe, and need to be in control all the time. And the truth is that's an illusion. But I thought if I did, I wasn't going to have to, repeat what I had done before. So this is a wound. And just like any other wound, it needs to undergo some type of healing. And that's where you may hear shamanic soul retrieval can come in. Soul retrieval is a powerful healing tool. And what we're dealing with here is on the spiritual and that hidden realm. And I'm here to tell you, it's a very real thing. There's hypnotherapy. There's other ways to get at this, but it is important to address, because I will tell you, our souls are not designed to go kill other people. Okay. And I think that is one of the hardest things in the military. And we have 22 veterans dying by suicide every day. And for a country as advanced, quote, as America is, I'm sorry, that is absolutely horrific that we can't get those numbers down. And the part I think that is missing from treatment is this whole soul loss, because people go to theater and witness horror and terror and stuff they don't want to even talk about, more or less try to think about, but it's in their body, and the body remembers. There's a book out called, what's his name? Bessel.
Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, the body keeps the score. It doesn't forget. So even though you may not want to think about it, it is still there. And that part of you that fractured it did it for self-protection. Okay. So it had a reason why it needed to do that. The trauma was just too severe. But you've got to call that back in so that you can be whole and aligned again in body, soul, mind, and spirit.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. That's powerful. Cool. Thank you so much for being. Thank you so much. Look, there's a lot to unpack in that, right? I mean,
it is.
I think unfortunately, we're not going to have time.
I talk about it in my book a lot, and even a concept called spiritual amnesia. We just forget.
Spiritual amnesia.
Yeah, that's a whole different. Yeah, we forget who we are.
Name of the book, Nicole?
You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. I just narrated it, so it's on Audible, and you can do a free month subscription and get it through that. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Go to my website, www.NicoleKerr.com. I'll send you the first free chapter. It's only $10. Some libraries have it now. So it gives you some resources in there. And I just wrote it from my heart. And the reason I wrote it is it helped me heal to write it, actually, even though it was hard. And I want you to look at your fears regarding death. There's a fear checklist that you can check off on fears about death. Bring it up in a book club. We need to bring this book into a book club to start discussing. There's lots of questions at the end for a book club discussion, but I guarantee you, if you start talking about this with other people, you're going to get to a level of intimacy and knowing people that you have never known with them when you talk about this subject. And I just want, I pray and I hope that may my book inspire you to live fully, because if you're in fear, you're not going to truly live fully with your heart open and your hands opened as wide as they can be.
Nicole, thank you so much. And that's NicoleKerr.com. Does that work? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you.
Really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Spiritual Dope Podcast. Stay connected with us directly through spiritualdope.co. You can also join the discussion on Facebook, Spiritual Dope, and Instagram at spiritual_dope. If you would like to speak with us, send us an email through brandon@spiritualdope.co. And as always, thank you for cultivating your mindset and creating a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking part of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay fully up to date. Until next time, be kind to yourself and trust your intuition.